Hello, you're listening to Popcorn Pals, and this episode, I'm joined by freelance film critic Andrew Fraser, where we're discussing Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. I'm Tim Ifland, movie buff, and this is Popcorn Pals, a popcorn podcast with Leigh and Tim spin-off where I'll be joined by a rotation of movie-loving legend guest hosts to discuss the latest and greatest new big screen releases. It's the same salty fun, but with some new flavors, and I'm absolutely delighted to have one of my friends join me today, a triple threat in arts and entertainment, a freelance film critic, film and TV production chameleon, and a Kylie Minogue music video star, Andrew Fraser. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, Tim. How are you? Thanks for having me. And that was an amazing introduction. I'll take it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can have that one for free. For our listeners, I think they might like, what do you mean a Kylie Minogue music video star? Can you just give us an abridged version of what that experience was like and your role in a Kylie Minogue music video?
I mean, it feels very generous to say that. I mean, glorified extra is probably more accurate. But yeah, I mean, that was quite a while ago now, but it was about like 10 years ago when I was dancing and Kylie Minogue came back to town, to my hometown of Melbourne and her hometown as well. And somehow through, various people, I ended up in this video with her, and that led to a subsequent performance at, the greatest award show of all time, the Logies. And yeah, that was my brief experience with Kylie, who was lovely. And,
Yes.
that was the peak, and it's been downhill ever since.
Oh, you know what? We all have a peak moment in our lives, and look, we'll help push you uphill, Andrew. But something that you did quite recently, and I stumbled across it in my dad's house, and I was listening to ABC Radio, and there was a very familiar voice that I heard. Now, you recently featured on ABC Radio to talk movies. What was that gig like, and what movies did you review while you were on the airways?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm very lucky to be on the rotating group of critics on ABC Drive with Richard Glover. And on that episode, I was doing, I think, a double feelings feature of You Hurt My Feelings, the Nicole Holofcener movie, and No Hard Feelings, the Jennifer Lawrence starring raunchy comedy. And yeah, it's great to be able to chat film whilst also kind of working, I guess, in the industry and get these opportunities to talk to people like yourself and be a film lover. As much as it is fun to be part of the industry, it's even more fun to talk about movies, and great movies especially.
Yeah, of course. And I think this conversation is going to be a good one. So let's travel to the American Southwest, Andrew, and get on with the show. And we're going to talk Asteroid City. We follow a writer on his world-famous fictional play about a grieving father who travels with his tech-obsessed family to small rural Asteroid City to compete in a junior stargazing event, only to have his worldview disrupted forever. Asteroid City is directed by Wes Andrerson, from a screenplay by Anderson, and from a story by Wes Anderson and Roman Coppola. Now, this is where I might need to have like a toilet break or a drink break or something, because as in any Wes Anderson movie, the starring lineup is exceptional. So this is not an exhaustive list, but an exhausting one nonetheless. So the film stars Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks is in there. We have Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Jack Ryan, Adrian Brody, Steve Carell. This is where I need to take a break. Maya Hawke, Hong Chow, Willem Dafoe, Matt Dillon, Rupert Friend, Hope Davis, Liev Schreiber, and let's just throw in a sprinkle of Aussiness in there with some Margot Robbie to cap it off.
I don't think there's anyone left in Hollywood.
Well, I know. I mean, it's because this movie, I believe, was filmed during, I guess, whatever the height of their pandemic was in sometime in 2021. So COVID was still a whole thing here. So, I mean, it's not to say that Wes Anderson can never pull a cast, but I guess all these people weren't really doing all that much because, making movies is always an impossible miracle that they get made, but even more so for the last couple of years. But I don't know how he does it. Like it's not like Wes Anderson sort of became this filmmaker everyone they stumble over to be in. Like he's always been able to pull big tickets in his movies. What do you think is it about Wes Anderson that people just throw themselves at his projects?
I mean, I think it's interesting with Wes Anderson because, whilst, like you said, so many high profile actors have been in part of his movies, they don't necessarily live and die on the performances. Obviously, Wes Anderson is so
Mm.
recognized for his elaborate production design and the incredible craft that goes into his movies. And I think some of his harsher critics have accused him of, using actors sort of as props in his models that he sort of creates in these worlds.
Mm.
So it is interesting that he attracts so many people, but I think it is his ability to construct such a strong, fantastical world that actors want to be a part of it. They want to experience what it's like to live inside Wes Anderson's mind, whether it's for a couple of hours or a day or however long it takes them to shoot their roles. And in this film in particular, there are so many actors, like the many that you listed off, that, many of them only appear very briefly in what I imagine didn't take all
Mm.
that long to shoot. But, I don't think anyone would pass up the opportunity to be in a Wes Anderson film purely to experience what that set must be like, to see the level of detail that goes into his work.
Yeah, 100%. And just to build on your point, there's like he has this real ability as a filmmaker and as a writer, as a director, to weave in multiple voices, but have them all come together so coherently in some sort of like orchestrated magic. He's working with a lot of actors, a lot of characters, some that say more than others or have more to say, have more to reflect back onto yourself, onto the audience, for you to maybe see something in yourself there. But the lure for an actor is definitely there because it's just a fun couple of days on set to be quirky AF. Some of his characters are really quirky. They just come in, say something bizarre, and get out, and then they'll be in his next movie in 2 years and do something kind of cool
Totally.
again.
And it's a testament to Wes's style in that, he pulls
Mm,
so many different actors who come from various backgrounds, and whether it's theatrical training or lots of theater experience, or they're known for their movie stardom. Yet it speaks to
mm.
him and his singular talent in that he's able to get everyone on the same wavelength. And oh, that's a Wes Anderson style performance. It really speaks to how carefully he's curated his own artistic ability.
Help me understand what your relationship with Wes Anderson films are. Like, I can obviously you said, we're friends and we talk about movies all the time, but I feel like you are a real big fan. Have you always been? Do you think he's stumbled a few times, or is he? Do you think you consider him as quite a consistently good filmmaker in his filmography?
It's funny. Like, I do like Wes Anderson, I think, generally. I mean, I like anyone who can cultivate a really strong theatrical or filmic voice. And he obviously does that in spades. But I don't know if I would really consider myself a huge fan of his necessarily, in the sense that, when I think of the great modern filmmakers, he wouldn't necessarily be the first or even the second that comes to mind.
Hmm.
But he's had an unmistakable impact on film, and I'm grateful for how unique his place in especially the current sort of landscape is.
Mm.
But I think in recent years I've felt maybe a bit cooler on him, whether that's influenced by sort of general consensus, which maybe, has gone a bit off, or people feel like he repeats himself, or whatever the criticism is. But there are definitely films of him that I really love. I really enjoy The Royal Tenenbaums, and
Mm.
really enjoyed Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest. I maybe wasn't as infatuated with The French Dispatch or Isle of Dogs, which are his most recent output, but I am really excited to talk about this film. What about you, Tim? How do you feel about Wes's recent work or his previous work?
I'm a huge fan of him, and there's a few facets to that. Like, I think his visual stamp is just so distinctive and just so divine. I just love getting lost in what he puts on the screen. And the only way that that can actually be elevated so much is how he writes his characters, because he does something really special with them. Like he's quite an awkward filmmaker. Like he writes a lot of his characters, especially like the protagonists, in really like awkward but endearing ways. And then you have these really heightened characters that elevate the really bombastic. You think Adrian Brody in this movie, like he's a big, larger than life character. But then you have like a Steve Carell who's just this weird hotel manager with vending machines of wonder. You can buy property off this vending machine, or you can order martinis. Like, I don't know, they're just little things that I always take away from his work. And it's just nice to have nuanced filmmaking, consistent nuanced filmmaking, to go into make you go away and think about it, because you kind of alluded to the fact that within this current landscape, and I'm assuming you're referring to things like superhero movie fatigue and all those big Hollywood blockbusters that are just,
Definitely.
they're spending $300 million on a steaming pile of fucking shit. And I'm sick of smelling,
You said it, Tim.
right, I'm sick of smelling like the burning bag of poo at my front door that is Hollywood. They just keep lighting it. They're not learning the lesson. So it's just really refreshing that, I think Wes Anderson is really reliable as a filmmaker to offer something really, really quite fun. I'm going to agree that I don't think the French Dispatch quite hit the mark. It's always hard for like an anthology, anything anthology, to hit the dizzy heights equally, because the stories just stand alone and some are stronger than others. And I think they had quite a weak middle part, which is so hard to say as a fan of like Frances McDormand and Timothée Chalamet, who I believe were part of that weaker story within the middle. But his movies are quite episodic anyway, because you've just got so many little bit players. So it's just how he marinates them all together. And I think Asteroid City does work in that sense really, really well. I hate using the term like, oh, return to form or whatever, because I don't think he's ever really stumbled that hard.
No.
There are just movies you like more than others, right?
And even, in a Wes Anderson film that maybe you connect to less on an emotional level, or maybe you're not that taken with, there's always such a high level of craft on display, whether it is in the production design or the score or the performances, that, even a lesser Wes Anderson film is a great experience nonetheless. And there's always something to take away. So I'm definitely very grateful that we have him working as an artist.
Let's dive into this movie a little bit. So, what I think that Asteroid City does brilliantly is balance like two distinct worlds. In essence, a play within a play. Now, that is definitely something that isn't new to filmmaking. The whole meta play within a play, sort of, we're watching this piece of art be created, but then it's reflected in this film sort of world that this movie delivers. Do you like that trope in movies? Were you nervous going into this when it was starting like that and you think, oh my gosh, it's another play within a play sort of thing? I'm a little bit over this.
I mean, I know some people don't really like an inside baseball kind of film, filmmakers making movies about movies, or, similar forms. But as someone
Yeah.
who, does have a big interest in those things, both the behind the scenes aspects and, just enjoying things as an audience member, I was very instantly interested. And it's definitely a genre that I naturally gravitate towards too more. So I can also admit that I'm in the market for this film, and was kind of from the get-go. Though going into it, I think like I don't really
Yeah.
know where my expectations were at, because I don't feel like I watched too much like promotional material and really just wanted to go in as blind as possible. And very quickly I was getting quite excited by what he was doing, and particularly the way that it was not just a play within a play, but I think it was like a television program about the making of a play about a play. Like there were even more layers to it, which I was interested for a man who, or an artist who was so interested in form, the creation of something. And I was excited by how he would approach that. And he's already been kind of working towards that, I guess, in the recent films, but
Yeah.
this felt like a even extra layer was being added to it.
Yeah, I really like that extra layer. And maybe just to give some context to the listener, you've either watched the film or you're about to. So we open in a television studio soundstage. It's in the 1950s, and we have the host, who's played by Bryan Cranston, who's just a wonderful voice actor, isn't he? He's just so perfect for this sort of like thing.
He's amazing.
He's there physically, of course, but he's just got this tone to how he kind of presents dialogue. It's just no one like it. And he says, tonight's program takes us backstage to witness firsthand the creation, start to finish, of a new play mounted on the American stage. And then he continues, this is the sort of layers about how the film part of it comes in. Asteroid City does not exist. It is an imaginary drama created expressively for this broadcast, but together they present an authentic account of the inner workings of a modern theatrical production. So I just love how Wes Anderson kind of thrusts you into like this witty, kind of pretentious sort of world. And he's like, we're going to play and double in all these things. It's a play, it's a movie, but it's not really a movie. And they're going to experience these characters who are both actors and characters of this movie, and experience this moment in time of this, alphabetic soup of voices in a really wonderful, quirky ways, as Wes Anderson always does. And you were once a theatre kid, Andrew, and you're a dancer and a trained
I
actor.
think once a theatre kid, always a theatre kid in some ways.
Right. That's it. That's right. What's it like seeing a film that dramatizes the process? Like, do you view these things like, do you find them funny, triggering, relatable, or like all of the above when you're seeing like a piece of art come to life in this sort of genre, this sort of context?
I mean, I think this movie is so interesting because it's kind of working on so many layers. And as you sort of mentioned, one of them is this, I guess, oh gosh, how do you describe it? Section of the film where it's about the process of making something. And in this instance, they're making a play. And there's sort of
Mm,
this analysis of, why do we sort of create? And there's a lot about actors, and there's sort of a riff on the formation of the Actors Studio, which came out of New York in the 50s and produced the likes of
yes.
great acting teachers like Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler. They were the founders, and Ellen Burst and Al Pacino, all these great actors came out of there. And so
Mm,
that really took me by surprise in the film. I had no idea that element was sort of going to be in it, but it was interesting to me because it was that style of acting really changed things. It was sort of this movement from a much more arch style of acting, which I guess Wes Anderson does tend to operate more in, into a more quote unquote real, raw, emotional style of acting. And so for me it was sort
mm,
of like
mm.
this, it offered this proposition from Anderson of how he sort of maybe deals with criticisms of people saying like, oh, your work is, it's cold, it's distant, it's it's overly designed, we can't relate to it, where's the human emotion. And I felt like by making it quite literally about actors acting and kind of adding this meta element,
Mm.
it became this really interesting commentary on his role as an artist and how he approaches these things, whether it's aiming for a sense of control or not. And I don't know, I found that, I guess, yes, as someone who has had some experience performing or has studied these things, I found it super fascinating. I thought he portrayed it in a really unique way that I don't think I've really seen before. And
Yeah.
again, that selfishly aligns with my interests, but I think, yeah, he's doing it in at such a way that I don't think you need to necessarily know anything about the Actors Studio to get something out of this. It's about the way that everyone is a performer in a sense in their own life, and we are always playing roles in a way in our need to kind of get through the day.
Yes, right. That's very, very true. I think that one of the things I like so much about this, and it's to build on that sort of criticism of Wes Anderson and his cold characters, but in this, I found them quite complex and layered because of the meta-ness of it. Because in its simplest form, like I love how like the story of Asteroid City in that American Southwest town in 1955 with the gigantic meteor crater and the observatory nearby, all that sort of that visual tapestry. But you have just this moment in time where a group of people are passing through this place and they have a shared collective wild experience. But it's also more than that because it's a surprisingly intimate look at the lives of these people that are dealing with their own stuff. Within that is also the actors playing those characters and what they're going through as well, the whole backstage look. So I found myself quite drawn to a lot of these characters and what they're dealing with because one of the main themes that it's going through is the theme of grief and how you deal with that and communicate that to your children who have lost their mother. And it's, you think, oh my gosh, how could this play out this way? But I mean, until you go through something like that, you don't know how you're going to react or how that's going to manifest in your own life. And this is just a little taste of how a character with their children is like dealing with grief, but of course within this just fantastical sort of setting and other series of events that just elevate it to new heights, I
Yeah,
think.
definitely. And I think that is what is sort of interesting about this movie is that you can really take it on a sort of surface level as being quite literally about these plays and this the story of these people. But yeah, to me, I think it was an interesting sort of commentary from Anderson on a couple of levels. I think, like you sort of alluded to, the ways that
Mm,
we sort of get to know a bunch of these characters who are, in a sense, characters in a play as much as they are characters in the film. And, we get a sense of, underneath their sort of facades, they're all dealing with something, yet whether it is the loss of a loved one or anxiety about the future, or being good enough, or all these very relatable human sort of emotions. There is that element of, at the same time, these are actors playing these roles, like they're playing people who are going through that, as well as being famous people that we recognize playing actors who are
Mm,
playing, again, it just goes round and round in circles. But I think to me it was sort of really moving, because that, combined with Wes Anderson's overly curated design, it sort of really spoke to that notion of, no matter how hard you try to be ahead of the game or try and get control of your life, things will come in and disrupt that. Much in the way that,
mm,
you want your life to exist in this perfect symmetrical frame. You want to be able to know where you're going and have the answers to everything at the right time. But it's always disrupted by something, whether it is a death, or it is, disappointment or failure, and all these sort of things, a literal asteroid, or, without
mm,
spoiling the film, something coming down from space. I think, yeah, it was a surprisingly moving film to me in that regard. And I was
mm.
struck by how sort of poignantly that was all weaved through, especially because, as you sort of said before, the film, was shot during COVID, and there is an
Mm.
element of quarantining that happens in the film without
Yeah.
necessarily giving too much away. So it was an interesting on that level of being a sort of comment on COVID without quite literally having to address it. But, how in that time that was so disrupted, how people, were stuck in one place, kept inside their homes, how they all had to kind of relinquish control or find connection and find beauty in other ways.
Mm,
And I was really taken by how, Wes was able to bring his style and his point of view to that. He'd never sacrificed any of the aesthetic, beautiful things that interest him. All the quirk was still there, but it felt really modern and fresh to me. And it felt like
mm.
such a unique take on a collective experience that we've all had.
Yeah, so beautifully put. Yeah, I don't think I'd really joined the dots, but it makes so much sense. It's like maybe that could be just another subconscious way that people are connecting with this movie so much, is just that shared experience of that quarantining over a singular event that basically shut the world down so instantly, and that we all just had to find our feet. But everyone's lives had to keep going. There was a point in time where everyone's dealing with stuff, and then all of a sudden, everyone around the world is dealing with one thing at the same time. That's an extraordinary phenomenon that we went through recently. And it's even more poignant in the fact that this film was still being made a couple of years ago during the height of all of that. I believe Bill Murray's not in this movie. It's like the first Wes Anderson movie Bill Murray hasn't been in since the mid 90s.
Yeah, I think since Rushmore, right?
Yeah. He contracted COVID, and all the protocols at the time meant that he had to give up his role and end up going to Steve Carell. So once I learned that, I was like, oh, I wonder, of course, like Bill Murray would have just been perfect in that role. But I'm also really glad that Steve Carell had some fun with that one. But it just, yeah, it's that sort of quarantine thing. It's so true. I think what Wes Anderson does really well thematically and with characters is he doesn't need to go far for his story to go far. You basically stay put in very siloed environments. You've got Asteroid City, which is this beautiful self-contained town, and we'll talk about the visual stuff a little bit later. But then you have also the backstage world of the actors, and maybe a few other set pieces like a train with a conversation and things like that. But it's quite contained storytelling, which he's always somehow excelled at, because there's just so much to take in, so much to enjoy within those set pieces. He doesn't need to make like this big grand exploration around the world. It's like these are characters here now in this space, and you never want to leave. A lot of the commentary around movies these days is that they're so long, and I'm sure you can agree in some instances. And this is a neat hour and 45 minutes, but I don't know how you felt. I would have happily loved to have stayed in Asteroid City for much longer.
Definitely. I mean, I think, like, I appreciate how much he crams into, a really swift runtime. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
just always with his films, I think, that's why they warrant repeat watching, is because they're so packed to the brim
Mm.
with detail. You find new intricacies in the performances, or you find another aspect of a prop that you maybe hadn't picked up on the first time. And I really think that speaks to his level of care and craftsmanship. There's a lot of films maybe that are coming out that, you don't necessarily feel a need to revisit. But I haven't been able to watch this again since I saw it, but I am really looking forward to doing that, because I think I'll be able to make even more sense of perhaps the myriad of things that he was
Mm.
sorting through here, because I really do think there was a lot at play, and that's what really struck me on the first view, is that I kept kind of going, oh wow, he's really like throwing everything at the wall here and kind of landing a lot of it. At least for me, it really felt that way. So yes, I think it's a testament to his sort of skill as a director and a writer that many of us will return to his films, or have returned to his previous films, and will find more things to enjoy.
Oh, definitely. Such a good point. I find the rewatch value of his movies quite high, some more than others. And I haven't seen all his filmography. I'm really annoyed at myself that I still have not seen Moonrise Kingdom,
Yeah, I think you would really like it.
because it's one of those films that I just hear so much positive noise about. I'm like, gosh, I've really got to pull my finger out it. It's like 10 years old now. Like, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, let's
I
not
think it was a
talk about
2012 release, wasn't
that.
it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I know. It's wild.
Blink and you miss a decade. Yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, he churns out movies really fast, and it's actually quite astonishing because they are so detailed. They're so detailed and whimsical and wonderful and eccentric, and they all have something to say, and all the characters just, they're always new and fresh. And even though a lot of the performers come back, they're like, oh, I want to do this again. Like, I feel like that they work on extending their range as actors in Wes Anderson movies, because they kind of go along the spectrum of
Hmm.
quirky characters, if you will. I don't know, is quirky character, like, is that too simple to call Wes Anderson characters quirky? Would you use another word like complex or something? I don't know. I just, quirky seems endearing and it seems to work for me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think like definitely the shorthand of that is totally fair. And I think everyone knows what that sort of
Mm.
means, particularly in that he kind of really came up in that like late 90s, early 2000s sort of style where, that almost
Mm.
indie pop kind of era that was really popular, and that all got sort of butchered. But I think like it's interesting because like it's such a popular trend at the moment. Like, prior to Asteroid City coming out, there was like that big TikTok sort of thing where everyone was doing like this is a day in a Wes Anderson movie, or like my life as a Wes Anderson movie. And to me, that actually only highlighted how irreplaceable he kind of is as an artist, or how singular he is, because everything that
Mm.
everyone
Mm.
identified as traits of him, they are correct in that, yes, he loves symmetry, and yes, he has this sort of like jangly scores that he enjoys, and
Mhm.
everything is curated in beautiful pastels. But watching people try and sort of do their idea of, Wes Anderson only highlighted to me how incredible he is, and like how much craft and effort it takes to make
Yes.
the frames as beautiful as he makes, but also the frames are filled with story, and he knows that a
Mm.
shot is communicating multiple things. It's not just, oh, person stands in the middle of the frame wearing a beret, like it's a very reductive
Yeah.
way. At the end of the day, it's all like a silly
Mm.
trend. It doesn't really matter. But when there were videos of people talking about, oh, it's so easy, and it just sort of made me feel frustrated, not only for
Oh,
him, but
how
also
dare
just
they?
the amazing craftspeople, the costume designers and cinematographers and set dressers that he works with
Yes.
repeatedly. And I think the fact that he has so many repeat
Mm.
collaborators obviously speaks to his temperament as an artist. He must be great to work with if people keep coming back. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's I think the quirkiness is, like it's definitely fair, but I also think there is a lot kind of going under the surface. And I think those repeated themes of, his interest in rebellious kids and overbearing or absent parental figures, or, the death of a
Mm.
significant other or a parent, having that always bubbling underneath the, beautiful aesthetics kind of adds that extra layer to his work. I think that makes it so compelling.
Absolutely. Look, Andrew, I don't know about you, but I will not let TikTok ruin Wes Anderson.
There is much that is great about TikTok, but yes, seeing the AI generated Wes Anderson videos was, drawing me closer to death, I think.
And didn't the cast on the campaign trail do their own like Wes Anderson sort of shtick on the press junket thing?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, good for them. They've got to cash that check. You got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't so keen on that. What do I
yeah,
know?
it just goes to show, without Wes behind the camera or the iPhone, You're never going to get the beautiful product that we're also spoilt with every time he turns out a film.
No, unfortunately not.
Is there anything else about the story or the script that you'd love to talk about, or do we want to move on to talk about some of the characters and performances in the film?
I think we can definitely talk about some of the performances. I mean, I was really taken with Jason Schwartzman and Scarlett Johansson's dynamic, which I think, is a central
Oh my gosh.
thread throughout the film. Their relationship is a really compelling element, and I really enjoyed particularly Scarlett Johansson in this style. I think her qualities as an actor
Yeah.
really lent well to Wes's sort of vision of her, and I loved her sort of throwback acting style, which recalled, people like Elizabeth Taylor or Marilyn Monroe, which I think, were very deliberate references,
Yes.
but she really embodied that period style of acting in a beautiful way, but
Mm.
still with the sort of depth and modernity that I guess maybe she's more known for. But yeah, I was really, really taken with her, and the relationship between her character and Jason Schwartzman I found really compelling. What about you? Were there any standout performances for you?
Oh, I think that the two-handers that they had throughout the film really drew me in, and they drew me in many ways. And as I referenced before, like I would have loved to have stayed in Asteroid City for longer, and it really was to just sit by the window frames of their two characters, just having a conversation. Her in the bath,
Hmm.
and him, developing film, lighting his. I was obsessed with how the physicality of him lighting his pipe. I just thought it was brilliant. It was just this character quirk. There's that word again that he brought, that Jason Schwartzman brought in, and I think Scarlett Johansson had a similar sort of approach to her character, where you referenced movie stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Marilyn Monroe, and they were some of my notes as well. Not only in her like vocal work and delivery, but also just the physicality and how she just centered herself in the space, but within the framing of a Wes Anderson movie. Like, it was just the perfect marriage of a modern, popular, and very talented actress drawing inspiration from old Hollywood. And part of that has to do with also it being set in the 50s as well, I think, just as a tone and an aesthetic. It was just so wonderful to see Scarlett Johansson really excel within, I mean, Wes Anderson's kind of own genre, isn't it? And I really hope that she discovers more of that ability as an actress in more films with his. It's honestly one of my favorite performances of hers. I was just so drawn to. I was just so connected to her performance. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. She was really great. I also really enjoyed, I mean, a lot of the performances. I mean, a lot of them, as we sort of alluded to before, are quite brief, but
Mm.
there's one scene with Margot Robbie as well that I did think was
Yes.
really strong, and I thought was some really nice work from her. It's interesting. Like, I don't know if you've seen, speaking of Margot Robbie, but I've seen a few people online sort of say that Asteroid City in many ways really is Barbenheimer, in that it
Yeah.
combines many of the elements of Barbie,
Yes.
not to mention Margot Robbie being a part of the film, but also the sort of candy
Mm.
colored aesthetics with, elements of science and, questions of mortality, and in the way that
Mm.
Oppenheimer deals with it. And so I sort of thought, yeah, then there needs to be the triple feature of Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Asteroid City. Because I think, yeah, this movie really does explore a lot of things. And yeah, it is filled with a lot of great performances. It also made me think of, I wish I could remember which film critic I read sort of mentioned this, because I would
Mm.
love to give them the credit. But they made a really good point about, a lot of people, I guess, have made note of, and as you did at the beginning, about how many famous people are in this movie, or actors
Mm.
that we're just very familiar with that are high profile. And this critic, who I, yes, wish I knew who it was, made a great point about, it sort of creates this uncanny feeling of, in terms of representing a life that, for
Mm.
many of us, the people in our life are like the movie stars of our life. They're the significant people that we know. Our lives are populated with, people that we have long-term established relationships with, much in the way that we do have these sort of
Mm.
parasocial relationships to movie stars, and that we've also known them our whole lives without actually fully knowing them. And I sort of thought that was quite sweet, especially in terms of how much this movie sort of is dealing with, what I guess a life means, having that sort of effect of, having a starry cast in the way that we all have a cast list of our own lives. I thought was like a really interesting way of looking at the film, and it really put into perspective a lot of the things that I think he is exploring with a big acting troupe, and these sort of ways he loves to have a repeated troupe of actors in his own movies. And yeah, it just really sparked my brain off in thinking about like, yeah, we do sort of have people who we routinely collaborate with, or people that come in and out of our
Yeah.
life, but they still hold a really special place. And yeah, I think the film, yeah, has these emotional resonances that maybe people wouldn't necessarily expect, just because they get so fixated by the aesthetics and the design of his filmography. But yeah, I thought that was really great, and a testament to how beautiful all the performances are calibrated in this movie.
If you ever join the dots as to who that film critic is, I'd love to read more of their take on that.
Yes, I'll have to look it up, but it's such a good point.
I mean, it just leans on that whole phenomenon about when a performer dies or an actor dies, and how the world just kind of mourns together. It's bizarre, but it's so true, because they're part of your life, because you have these like emotional connections with their work, whether it's like nostalgic or you revisit them over the years. And yeah, it's such an interesting phenomenon. One of the other actors in this who I quite love seeing show up in Wes Anderson movies, I loved his work, Jeffrey Wright's work in The French Dispatch, especially.
Definitely.
And I just love in this film, he plays a general, how he leans into the theatrics of his character. There's just a really great speech that he gives to the audience that's just really quite fun, and Jeffrey Wright just leans into it big time. I would love to see Wes Anderson direct his actors, because I think a lot of their performance can come out of the words, right, and what they're looking around. But I really am curious to know, like, what are the sort of acting notes that Wes Anderson gives his actors for them to go to these places, because it's just a dream.
Yeah, totally. I'd be really curious about that as well. I mean, I think it helps probably that he has such a recognizable style that I'm sure many of the
Mm.
actors like come to the piece kind of already knowing, okay, well, I've seen his other movies, I kind of get what he goes for. But yes, it would be really fascinating to see what those really particular points of direction are. And yes, the Jeffrey Wright
Mm.
shout is great. He has such a commanding screen presence. It was lovely to see him again.
Speaking of commanding a screen presence, I loved Jake Ryan, who played Woodrow in this film. He's like that teenage brainiac, the kid. He's there to present his science experiment or whatever. I found him really endearing, super intelligent, of course, like really sweet. He held his own against a sleuth of all these big names that we're listing here. Yeah, a really really nice prominent character in the movie. I don't know what I was expecting in terms of who's going to be the lead, but I would almost say he's kind of like the third lead against Schwartzman and Johansson, I guess you
Yeah,
could say.
totally. Him and all those other sort of younger actors, the kid actors, if you will,
Mm,
were really great, each with sort of a unique screen presence. But yes, he definitely was perfectly cast opposite Jason Schwartzman. That was a completely believable dynamic between the two of them.
yes.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned Tom Hanks, who's a big addition to the Wes Anderson
Oh yeah,
cinematic
I know him.
universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really great seeing him working in this way too. He's sort of in such an
Mm,
interesting point in his career where he can really kind of
isn't
do
he?
anything. And it's been quite interesting in this sort of last 10 years watching him sort of, take some stylistic risks. But I really loved his
Mm,
work in this too, especially, he has a beautiful scene towards the end of the film and he's opposite the three youngest actors in the movie, which is this hilarious little
aren't they great?
trio of girls who are so perfectly cast and do such a great job.
Yes.
And yeah, really surprisingly moving. Yeah, it's a kind of great stroke of genius casting Tom Hanks, because I don't think he, necessarily would be the first to come to mind for, a Wes Anderson film, but
Yeah, true.
it does sort of make sense when you sort of watch the movie unfold and some of the thematic elements of it. He's such a Americana actor in the way that someone like Jimmy Stewart was, that seeing him in this sort of tableau that Wes Anderson's created, I think was really perfect.
It's actually astonishing that an actor can still surprise you when they show up as an actor in a role, and you think, "Oh wow, oh Tom Hanks, oh yeah, okay, that's good," because you think you've seen him do and say everything that he possibly can, and he's a very well respected and awarded actor. So you think, "Oh, that's all good. He's just going to knock it out of the park." But when he chooses to do something really different, it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, totally.
It's not just like and this is no heat on on Tom Cruise, I really like Tom Cruise and act his movies. Like, I'm a big fan of the action genre, but Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise in everything. Like, he's Ethan Hunt. He's in Mission Impossible in every one of his movies, and he has been for decades. Like, there's not all that much difference in huge chunks of his filmography. He has made some great movies, but Tom Hanks, his range is definitely changing, I think, here, and doing some really cool stuff. And also, I just don't know why I compared Tom Hanks with Tom Cruise, but we're just going to go with it.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it would be really interesting to see someone like Tom Cruise in a film like this. I mean, I would be fascinated to see that. Not because I don't think he could do it. I definitely think he could.
Exactly.
But it's just that different thing of it's interesting, particularly because Wes Anderson is tending to use actors that we have, really strong connections with through their film work. That sort of meta element is always coming into play, which I think is particularly in this film, obviously very deliberate, but I think he is very knowing about using our pre-established relationships with these actors to sort of influence how we're interacting with the characters. I think it's really smart casting.
Is there any other piece of casting that you really want to call out that you thought, yes, that was just delightful, their performance? I mean, we could literally, Andrew, be here for another hour going through the cast. So we kind of have to kill our darlings.
I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, I don't really think there was a bad performance at all. I loved seeing Hope Davis, who's a character actress that I feel like I haven't seen in a while. And I really enjoyed her brief appearance. And I enjoy Tilda Swinton, of course. Can't go wrong there.
Give that woman another Oscar nomination. Like, I was before we started recording, I was like, has she ever won an Oscar? How many has she been nominated for? So I jumped on IMDb, and I was shocked to learn. She has not shocked to learn that she'd won, but shocked that she'd only been nominated once and won once for Michael Clayton, which is a great performance. But I'm thinking, my gosh, she shows up. She shows up every time.
Well, you have to start the campaign, Tim.
And I'm like, where are the accolades? Honestly, it's next on my to-do list.
Get the hashtag going.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what it could be. Tilda Swinton Oscars or something like that. Anyway, well, I'll put some food
some
for
thought into that. Yeah.
Put some thought into that. It's actually a shit hashtag that came up with on a whim.
I mean, it isn't 2012 anymore. I think you can be relieved of the hashtag duty.
Okay. Oh, God. You're just making me feel so old, you bastard. Yes, I still talk in hashtags. Let's talk about the visual language of this movie. Somehow, I'm always just so shocked at how beautiful he brings his movies together. And it's very apparent just how much time and collaboration that it takes to deliver these things. I was just absolutely in awe of the scene that we're introduced to Asteroid City with that gorgeous single take tracking shot on a rotating 360 camera rig, and you're just discovering all the parts and pieces of this town, all the quirks, all the nuances to it, all the comedy layers in there. You just hold on the bridge that goes nowhere, and the audience are laughing because it's just funny. It's just this bridge that will never be completed, and you move around, and you move on from that bridge, but it's part of the character as well, part of the whole vibe of the place. And I just think it's just such a skill to be able to tell a story so perfectly visually, and how he moves the camera. It's just a delight. It's always just so fun to see what he's going to do with the scene visually, isn't it?
Completely. Yeah. I think there's this interesting tension in the movie of a lot of it is in this beautiful, bright, sun-kissed color, lots of pastel greens and aquamarine. And then you have in the reality outside of the play, it's black and white. And so there's this sort of, constant jumping between the two, but both, are so formally considered and crafted with such care. I think there were, some striking moments of lighting, like there's like a great sequence where they're all sitting outside underneath this sort of rattan shade or something, and it creates these beautiful shadows all over them. And, just like you mentioned before, really interesting, inventive set design with, vending machines. And, he has a love for, models and animation, and that really comes into it in fun and surprising ways. And yeah, I think it's just always amazing to see what he can sort of conjure up with the artists that he works with. And I really loved the sort of almost Looney Tunes, like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner sort of element to the setting of, the titular Asteroid City. It was such a gorgeous place. It made you want to go to the theme park equivalent of it. It was so beautifully constructed. And I think I just enjoy a director that embraces artificiality. And I'm curious, maybe,
Mm,
with the success of this film, and also, as we mentioned before, Barbie, whether there'll be a
mm,
rise in, a sort of more directors wanting to embrace old school film techniques and, build films using, those tried and true methods of painted backdrops and detailed
mm.
models that are stand-ins for big wide shots. I love that level of inventiveness, and I love movies that acknowledge that, this is a considered frame. We've designed this. I like it when they don't shy away from that, and maybe that's just my personal taste, but I enjoy seeing the craft on display.
Oh gosh, so do I. I'll share that with you, that taste and love of practical filmmaking, because it elevates anything above what CGI or green screen, blue screen could ever possibly do. And I didn't love Barbie. I'm in that minutia of people that aren't absolutely blowing smoke out the ass of that film. Um, but visually, I was so arrested by it, and I was
Mm.
so impressed, and I thought there's nothing visually about that movie that I would ever let my quarrels and quandaries with the story impact that, because it's just astonishing. And hats off to Greta and her team, and same with Wes. Like, you are right, there are visual synergies between those two films. And it's something about a Wes Anderson film is that somehow he manages to balance intimate storytelling within visual scale,
Mm.
which is such a skill, because like all the mountains and the boulders and the rocks, like all that stuff in Asteroid City was constructed. There was very little green screen used, and a lot of forced perspective by the DOP and the production designer, working together on that. It's just, you think, oh, where is this town? Because it somehow feels real and tangible, but heightened and kind of fantastical. So I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist, but like it is all there physically. And I can just imagine how wonderful it would be as an actor to stand in that space and create within that space, because
Mm.
I don't know how you could endure filming an Avatar movie for like 5 years and never see anything other than the fucking dots on your face
Mm.
and some bloody blue screens around. Like that, it's actually astonishing that actors can exist and create in that space as well, but I think it would just be incredibly challenging, surely.
Totally.
Andrew, what about we wrap up our take on Wes Anderson's Asteroid City with a little summation of how we thought, and then I'd love to learn your rating out of 5 popcorn kernels, if you can so indulge me with that piece of
Yeah, of
information.
course. I think on the whole, I hopefully have communicated this, but I really, really loved this movie. And I honestly didn't expect to.
Mm,
And that, I think, is what I've sort of been saying to a few people, is that I maybe was going into this with a bit of Wes Anderson fatigue or something. Kind of very quickly into this movie, I really settled into it, the gear that it was operating in, and was really taken by it. And I honestly haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw it. And I'm really looking forward to
mm.
revisiting it. So I would highly recommend people go and check this out. I think, at worst, you'll enjoy the incredible production and costume design that Wes always delivers. But I do think there is a lot more going on in this movie, and I think it has really interesting things to say about some of the bigger themes in life, like
Mm.
death and existentialism and love. And I think it does it
All
in
the fun
really
stuff.
inventive ways. Yeah, all the fun stuff.
Yeah,
So I definitely think it would be probably a, can you do half a popcorn kernel? Because I reckon four and a
of
half
course.
popcorn kernels
Oh,
from
four and a
me.
half. Wow.
Maybe it's a bit mean to
Wonderful.
hold off that extra half, but I think I'd love to just, see where this film settles for me over time, and before I, maybe resort to calling it a 5 out of 5 popcorn kernel masterpiece. But I was really taken with it, basically. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, look, I'll allow that, the half, and then you can decide whether you want to pop that half kernel a little bit more in the microwave, because that's the beauty of revisiting cinema, isn't it? At one point in your life to another. I love rewatching movies in any sort of cadence, be it a year later or even 20 years later in some instances, because I'm now getting that old where it's like, oh, I haven't seen that movie in 20 years. Let's throw that back on. Fuck me. So, and then you take something different about it. Well, so for So once again, Wes Anderson has delivered a visual triumph in Asteroid City, but it is his inward personal examination of complex family relationships, new romance, parents versus children, in this case, secrets, discoveries, and mysteries that all combine to make a beautiful emotional and tonal balance that no one can strike better than Wes Anderson. A big screen and big heart feast for audiences. I'm going to rate it 4 popcorn kernels out of 5.
Very
That's
nice.
my little take. Yes.
I love it.
Well, Asteroid City is in Australian cinemas from August 10. And that's it for another episode of Popcorn Pals. I was joined by Andrew Fraser, freelance film critic. Andrew, where can people find you and your work out there on the internets and all that stuff?
Oh, well, I'm on Twitter while it still exists, or X, or whatever the hell it's called
do
now.
we call it X
Yeah,
now?
I don't know. But my,
God.
username on that is Andrew JT Fraser, and I post a lot of vague, random movie thoughts on there, as well as sharing some pieces of film criticism. But also Instagram is also a good place to find me at andrew.fraser. But otherwise, I don't know. Maybe you'll hear me on another episode of this or on the radio or wherever. I don't know. I'll pop up in random places too. So we'll see. But thank you so much for having me, Tim.
Of course. I've had so much fun having you on. It's been one of those things where, like, in this new format with Leigh on maternity leave and be kind of like hustling with this spin-off, is that I can invite people that I admire, people that I talk about and have relationships with about movies. And it's so exciting. And I'm so thrilled to have you on, and I'm glad that it was for a movie that resonated with you so much as well. Maybe the next one is, it's also really fun to talk about a movie that you hate. So we might talk offline to see what movie in the future you think you might hate, and we'll bring you on.
That sounds good. I'd love to.
Great. Well, as always, thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks so much.
If you enjoy our episodes, head over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe. While you're there, we would love you to rate us and leave a review. You can also find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Alexa, and where all good podcasts are found.